Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Trickway. You join us here today, Mr. Gray and I, as we talk about Mr. Gene Roddenberry and an article Mr. William Shatner made recently that's a bit controversial, and we're going to break it down a little bit. Do you want to say hello to the people, Mr. Gray?
Hello, people out there. I hope you're one with Trek today.
I'm liking this saying. I think it's going to catch on now. Gray, one with Trek. That's our slogan. That could be like we need to like hashtag that or something.
Right.
Anyway, to give people some context, uh, we weren't sure if there was enough information content in this to actually make it an episode. But do you want to know something? The more I went through it, the more I broke it down into like little points. There's actually a lot to talk about.
Mhm.
Gray, do you want to give them just the top line, the top paragraph of what Shatner said, and we can break it down?
Sure. I mean, the crux of it is that Shatner was at the San Diego Comic Con, and a fan had just said, what he thought of the newer Trek as compared to the original series, or TOS as we call it. And his comment was that he didn't like the new Trek, and he thought Roddenberry would turn in his grave over it. And everybody, and it caused a lot of controversy. Some people agreed, a lot of people disagreed, and so it started a whole thing.
Yes, I didn't know about this point until Gray brought it to my attention the other day, and like you said, it was just made at the San Diego Comic Con last month, and I missed that completely because I keep up to date with. I love Comic Con for all kinds of reasons, and if you tune into Gray's Green Room, which I'm a co-host on with Mr. Gray here, we do talk about that kind of stuff because it involves a lot of the Marvel DC stuff, which we talk about because we're big geeks at the end of the day. So essentially, there's a lot to unpack in this one, Gray. Now,
Yep.
Mr. Roddenberry had a bit of a reputation back in the day in Hollywood, from my understanding, that he was a genius at what he'd done, but he was pretty far ahead of his time for multiple reasons. In terms of the first interracial kiss, having an Asian on the show, um, doing things that people just didn't approve on. He tried to push the boat, so he pushed a lot of people's buttons, and he pissed off quite a few people in Hollywood for that. So people knew it was a genius, but at the same time they were like, come on, come on. So I'm not really surprised this has really happened. I'm looking through some points here, um, and Roddenberry back in the day had a kind of a guide or a Bible. It was known as a show Bible or writer guide, so he could keep all his writers on the same page. And that was fundamental Roddenberry because he was very controlling. He wanted to have it more or less exactly the way he wanted it, and he wasn't too interested in what other people thought. And that could be a bit controlling. Um, and if you can compare new Trek to old Trek, and that was the crux of what Shatner was talking about. He was talking about it's not as good as the original series. That can be controversial, as we know. I've got opinions on that one, and Gray's got opinions on that one, which we'll delve into a little bit very, very shortly. Well, I think where we can go from this one, Gray, is we can talk about some of the differences between modern Trek and the old Trek, right? And then we can see what you think on it. And then if people want to leave us a comment afterwards as well, they can do. It's worth quickly noting, actually, I should have done this at the start, apologies. This this YouTube video and all YouTube videos, including our introduction, will be available as a podcast as well. So if you don't want to see our pretty faces, why wouldn't you? Then you've got a podcast in audio form. It's just the Trekway as well, and it's available through all good podcasting services that you like. Pretty much they're all there, so you've got that option as well, guys, if you want. So we'll go over a couple of points, and feel free if you've got a point, Gray, that we haven't got down in the notes that you want to jump in with, please do. We don't need to do these in any particular order. So the first one, I strongly agree with this one. We've got melodrama, right? Now,
Mhm.
fans have long accused Star Trek Discovery, and it's not the only one, of being full of melodrama. A good example of this one, there's a chap called Anthony Thompson who wrote in July 14th that Discovery is an embarrassment with convoluted, badly written storylines and melodrama, it's easy for me to say, with more crying than you find on Young and the Restless. Now, I find that amusing. I don't know what that show is, but I find that amusing because I can just imagine it's that kind of show where there's a lot of that stuff, like a episodic, like a soap opera or something. Great. I'm thinking I'm getting that.
Well,
Just, do you know what this program is?
yeah, Young and the Restless is a soap opera, a
There we
daily
go.
soap opera. So, yeah. And I think the point of him saying a melodrama is right on target because a lot of Discovery is set up as a melodrama. And actually, if you go back, even the series that nobody talks about much anymore as Enterprise was also more melodramatic
In what
than it
way?
needed to be. It wasn't as episodic as one would think, number one,
Hmm.
and I believe that it was more into everybody. I mean, you want to know about the characters and you want to care about them, but when it starts to get into their every little nuance thing, it starts to get kind of annoying. Um,
Right.
and I think that was part of the problem with Enterprise, and I think maybe more so with Discovery. Um,
Yeah.
Star Trek originally was made as an episodic thing. Does it have to stay episodic? No, not necessarily. Um, but I think people sometimes confuse episodic with meaning that that's not good, and that shouldn't be like that. Just because it's episodic doesn't mean it's going to be bad. Everything was episodic originally,
Yeah.
and then it grew into what they call the long arcs or arcing storylines, etc. In fact, the science fiction show that started the whole thing with art with and I don't know if everyone knows this, but a lot of people do, was Babylon 5. When it came out in the 90s, no program was doing long arc stories. No program was doing overarching stories that carried on. Nobody. And
Yeah.
he came in, J. Michael Straczynski came in and did this. And ever since Babylon 5, everybody quietly started adapting the formula. And it's worked quite well for a lot of shows that went after Babylon 5 and have been on the air and are on the air today. But that doesn't mean that episodic is a bad thing. And sometimes some shows lend itself to being better when it is a little more episodic. Thus, Strange New Worlds getting back to episodic or going back to TOS, which was always episodic. TNG was basically always episodic, but they were able to weave in some of the overarching things without making it too overarched or too overarched, whatever you want
Yeah.
to use the word.
Yeah.
So they knew how to do it. They knew how to do it. And I think that's probably part of the problem with Discovery is they don't know how to do that. And they lost their way a little bit. And I know some people out there love soap operas. I'm not knocking the soap operas if you like them, but let's
Just
be
keep them out
fair.
of sci-fi and Star Trek, please.
Yeah, exactly. And let's be fair. It doesn't take any real brainchild to write a soap opera. I'm sorry. I mean, a
Yeah.
daily soap opera is just like you can predict everything that's going to happen in a daily soap opera.
I'm not a fan of the soap operas. I must admit, Gray. I think the only one I ever watched in university was Neighbours, the Australian soap opera, very popular in here in the UK and the States, and just finished recently. I was very sad, but I digress. That's the only one I've ever watched. I hate them. I don't think there should be a place in Star Trek for them. Now we have to be
Mm.
careful here, Gray, because the original series and Strange New Worlds are very similar in many ways for obvious reasons. They wanted to try and go back to where it was at the start, but also bear in mind that there's all these years of Trek, of canon, of modern ways of telling stories, modern CGI, modern everything essentially. So trying to blend the new with the old, but make it still feel classic at the same time. Now you still need a bit of character development. You still need, I mean, if a character cries, of course, horrific things can happen in Star Trek sometimes. You've had some uh, dark Star Trek, I would call it. That's maybe the Kelvin verse, I would say, is maybe a little bit darker sometimes than the other stuff. So a bit of crying, a bit of emotion, a bit of shock and awe is fine, but don't put it in all the time. I feel sometimes that in Discovery, for example, you would have Burnham and Tilly. They were good friends. I know Gray's working his way through Discovery because for people that don't know, he's not a fan of that series. He's got 2 seasons to watch, 3 and 4, but they're the better ones so far, so it shouldn't be too bad for him. But he knows at this stage Tilly and Burnham are good friends, but sometimes you were still getting elements of them almost having a girly girl moment in their quarters together, having a cry, and I'm like, come on, man.
Like all the time.
If you cry because you've just seen one of your pals being shot on the bridge or on a planet, then that's fine. There's something to that, but just having a cry in your quarters with your friend, I would maybe agree with him on that point. Leave that out and don't overdo it, because otherwise you're kind of going to ruin it and spoil it, and take it back to more the original stuff. In terms of the episodic stuff, Greg, you hit the nail on the head there as well. If you have serial arcs in these seasons, it lends itself more towards the melodrama, because that's part of what makes up these things. They need to fill it in. They need to join all these episodes together by putting in more and more drama, and that pops up too much. When you get episodic stuff, they don't have as much time to focus on that. So it's more difficult to write individual episodes, I think, than 3, 4, 5, a whole season as one story, And I hope they keep doing what they're doing on Strange New Worlds. I fear they won't. I fear it'll just be Strange New Worlds. Discovery and the rest of them will keep doing serial long arcs. I'd like to think I'm wrong, but who knows?
Well, we'll see, because we don't even know if other new Trek is going to come out, like they say, because the rumors have been going around about Section 31 and other shows for so long now.
Yeah.
And what people don't understand, not so much years ago, but today, in order to keep the shareholders happy and to keep people thinking that you're going to make money, you make announcements about shows that may never end up happening.
Yeah.
And you'll get the good feelies, and they go like, "Ooh, that sounds good," and then you end up never doing it. So Section 31 was mentioned, God, at least 2 years, 3 years ago. You seen it any recently?
Yeah, it's supposed to be in development for a long time. That's
Yeah.
an idea for yet another episode
Mhm.
that we can do. I mean, probably will. It's not a bad thing to have loads of ideas. There's rumors of other shows. Rumors of Section 31 was, at least we've been told, last, still in development. So you gotta take it with a pinch of salt at this stage until we actually see it on screen.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I say, we can certainly, we'll put that in the old notepad, Gray, and we'll talk about that, because that's a fascinating episode, rumored series, and series that we'd like to see within Star Trek. The next element of modern Trek that I think, in fact, I know based on what he said, that Roddenberry would not approve of, is what I'm reading here in this article. Is swords and sorcery, right? And there's a couple of sections for this that I've kind of wrote it down the wrong way, Gray, in case you're wondering where I'm going with this one. So he famously disliked space pirates, knights and princesses, things like that. And he did once say, and Gray's probably going to do me here for the pronunciation, knights and princesses, stalwart yeomen. Yeoman. There we go. Close. See, there we go.
Does anybody remember Yeoman Rand?
And dragons are not science fiction for our purposes. Now, I had to ask Gray what that was, stalwart, but he filled me in. But essentially,
it means like upstanding,
Yeah, and it's not. It's, if you think about Star Trek like that, it's for me, it's not like that. The recent, it goes on to say here in this article, the recent Strange New Worlds episode, The Elysian Kingdom, featured Anson Mount and the rest of the cast dressed in fairy tale costumes. Roddenberry might not have liked that one. Now, I have to agree. I'll read the section just after, purely because it ties in with it at the same time. He also, Roddenberry advises that the TNG should not feature Captain Picard and his crew flying around as space pilot. Galaxy policemen. This is the first episode of Strange New Worlds featuring Pike getting into the middle of a civil war on an alien planet. Some might suggest that Pike was not a galactic cop and more a mediator, but he was trying to stop a civil war. Now, I realise they're two separate points, but I kind of want to put them together to talk about them. Now, Gray, you and I both really enjoyed the Elysian Kingdom episode. I think I remember saying to you at the start when we were watching it, I said to you, "What the hell is this? What?
Yep.
What? You know?" And then by the end of it, I had a tear in my eye.
Sure.
Now I'm going to disagree with Roddenberry in this one, okay? But because you and I both enjoyed it, I imagine many other Trekkies out there enjoyed it. What's your opinion on that one, Gray? Did you enjoy it? Is Roddenberry right or wrong?
Well, first of all, I think when he was talking about not having princesses and dragons and all this stuff, I think he meant that in an overarching way. And
So
what I
you
mean
don't.
by that is like he didn't want that to take over Star Trek, and that's fine. That one single episode in Strange New Worlds was a separate episode that was there was a reason behind it. Why this all happened? It was an entity that caused this to happen. So kind of like Q in Next Generation, where he causes wild things to happen that are totally out of the ordinary. Same thing. It was only one episode that did this, and they probably won't do much like that again. So the whole series isn't princesses and dragons because if you're gonna think of a series that's princesses and dragons, then you're talking Star Wars, or you're
Yeah,
talking Game of Thrones. You
yep,
know, that's princesses and dragons, almost literally, because there's dragons in some of it. um, but that was meant to be that way, and those are still, great shows in their own right.
yeah.
One of the things I think that Roddenberry always did, and look, one thing I want to say up front before everybody starts getting bent out of shape is that everybody has their pluses and minuses, no matter how good, great you might be, and there's certain things he liked and disliked that maybe we agree or we don't agree with. And we have to remember too, the Trek's been around for 55 years or more. So things are going to change. The world doesn't just stay put in, in one way. However, good story writing is good story writing, regardless of whether it's overarching, not overarching, single episodes, whatever. As long as the writing's really there, it's there. And he did birth Star Trek, so obviously he did something right. And I think for the time that the series TOS was on, it made sense for him to be steering the ship because he was steering the ship through wildly uncharted waters at that time.
Yeah,
And he was brilliant on what he was able to get through the guise of sci-fi. Because a lot of the people that were watching TOS back then, they saw was a science fiction story. That's all they saw. So they weren't looking at it as being, like, necessarily some, political statements or things on culture today.
yeah,
They just thought it was a great sci-fi show. But so he was able to get all this under the radar, which was great. Now today they look a little more carefully at stuff like that, but you can still get things under the radar if you put it properly into the right kind of story without getting preachy. It's a fine line.
it is.
It
It's a very
it
fine line.
really is, and
Yeah,
people get like, well, they're trying to but you can it's funny how you can actually tell though if you're doing a preaching episode as opposed to something that just makes sense in a story. People are pretty intelligent out there. You can tell the difference.
yeah.
But anyway,
I'd like to give Trekkies a bit of credit with that one there. That make up their own minds on the subject. We We're the most grateful fans in the world if you treat canon, you treat the fans right, you do the right thing by them, the most loyal fans in the world. But the most arsey fans in the world if you just start pissing all over canon and you start ruining all the years and decades of Trek that came before. So stick to what you know. Don't You can chart new waters a little bit, but just be careful because you don't want to piss off Star Trek fans. But
um,
the point
I,
on you go, Gray.
no, I was gonna say I think it's okay. I guess it depends how much of a purist you are. I think it's
Yeah,
okay to maybe stretch things a little bit in canon occasionally, but as long as you don't stretch them to where you just don't believe
snap
it.
until they snap or break
Exactly.
or they don't exist.
Like I'll give you one big example, one huge example. Okay, when they introduced the character in Star Trek Discovery as being Burnham as being Spock's stepsister, whatever, right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, that's hugely wrong. And
yeah.
really busted and stretched canon. They never, ever, ever, ever should have went to that. It was
They
a crutch clean and
yeah
through.
they
And if
they
they had
stri-
just treated her as a regular character like any other captain that they've done, or character, it would have been better. I
That
also
was
think it was a mistake, a big mistake,
yeah.
to make Burnham as the featured character, and she wasn't a captain. I'm sorry, in Star Trek, it works better if you have a captain or some kind of command structure going on, at least at the initially. And so I understand they were trying something different, I get it. But when you first started watching it and you're looking at it and you're going like, essentially, there's no captain or a captain that was, as we know, Lorca was nuts. Um, it didn't. It just started losing people, man. They're sitting there going like, "Wait a minute, she's stepdaughter to Spock. How does this figure out?" And there is no captain, and then of course she ends up becoming captain. So why didn't you do that at the beginning?
They were the grey. They were stretching that point you just made. That technically didn't break canon because obviously Spock never said, "Oh, I'm the only child," or I don't recall him ever say that. So that's why they have literally grasped onto that little tiny fact and blew
Mhm.
it up massively. So they stretched it within a millimeter of breaking, snapping that piece of canon. And I
Yeah.
agree with you. They shouldn't have done that, mate. They should have left it be. Burnham, as her own character, is brilliant. I generally think the kind of first officer come captain she reminds me a little bit of Riker. Not completely, a little bit in
Mhm.
terms of he'll go and do the stuff that the captain won't. He'll be ballsy. He'll be a leader. He'll do the stuff that Jean-Luc Picard or whatever could never get away with doing because of their position, their standing. She's obviously a lot more nuts because she kind of started a civil war, really, didn't she? So well done, Burnham. Um, but yes, no, you're right, man. I think Roddenberry would. I think he's right and wrong on the whole swords and sorcery thing. Um, you don't want it to start turning into Star Wars. I don't know. I have nothing against Star Wars. It's one's fantasy, one's science fiction. And to be fair, Roddenberry, um, scientists like you've said before, Gray, were consulted at least some of the time, especially in more modern
Mhm.
times when they're writing Star Trek compared to Star Wars. So that's why I like Star Trek a lot more than I do like Star Wars. I like the stuff that's based on that. But we will get to. There's a point just after, and it's that actually speaks to that quite a lot. I wanted the follow up point. We kind of joined them together, Gray. About Roddenberry advising that the TNG should not feature Picard and crew flying around in the role of galaxy policemen. Now, I read that straight away and I just think Team America, the movie. And it's not picking on America, that's just, that I
Yeah.
get familiar vibes to that one and it's hilarious. Is he right to do that? Yes, because Starfleet are not, they're supposed to be a peaceful organisation despite making the USS Defiant. But again, that's another episode that we're going to talk about because that's my favourite ship. Spoiler. Um, but if we're being honest with you, if they do it in the right way, I don't have a problem with that because TNG, sorry, not TNG, Strange New Worlds, the episode where Pike's mediating on that alien world where he beams down. Now, I think that's a nice fine line that they're treading on properly because he is not acting like a cop. He is trying to be more of a mediator there, offering suggestions rather than pushing the boat out. Now, yeah, he is pushing the boat out slightly by, revealing the Enterprise to everyone because his hand's kind of forced. But I think he went about that the right way. I think the writers are going about that the right way. What is your thoughts on that, Mr. Gray?
I I think they definitely went the right way because as much as I might not like Discovery, the premise of that episode was the fact that this civilization saw what happened to the Discovery and the Enterprise when it was thrown into the future, et cetera. So there was a whole stellar phenomenon that happened that this planet was able to see, analyze, and figure out what was going on and back engineering and create uh warp core technology, but in the wrong way,
Should
in
we
the
should we
bad way.
suggest why really quickly, Gray? Why they knew about that? Do you recall why they knew about that? Can you fill the listeners in and the
Well,
viewers?
again, not remembering everything in Discovery, but the gist of it was the fact that because of what happened in season 2 but that particular episode, this civilization was able to examine what happened, and they figured out back engineered everything and made a warp core technology before they really should have. So really, Pike was thrown into a situation where this was quite unexpected.
Thanks,
So I don't think
Discovery.
exactly. So I don't think he would have done what he did, but I felt I think he was compelled to have to think on his feet and do something because he had no choice.
Yeah,
So he wasn't really at destroying the Prime Directive, which really wasn't there at the time, and that was another cool thing. They created the Prime Directive like after that episode,
yes,
which is
very smart.
which is very interesting. And that's another thing I really loved about the story. It really wove into the fact, okay, yes, it was unusual. Yes, we kind of had to interfere, sort of. We're not happy about it. It worked out okay, but this ain't happening again. Let's write the Prime Directive. And of course, later on, you hear Pike go, "Oh, that'll never work,"
Typical.
which I thought that
Uh,
was funny. But again, he was thrown into the situation, so he had to sit there and think on his feet. And I believe he came up with what he felt he had to use shock and awe in order to get these people to understand what could happen, what did happen to his own world, et cetera, et cetera. And he had to resort to it.
yeah.
Now, it could have backfired badly on him, but he took the shot, and luckily it didn't. So
So what because Gray's catching up in Discovery still, he has finished the first two seasons, so the bit in question he's talking about, to elaborate slightly more, is the very end of season 2,
mhm.
where the shit's hitting the fan and it's Pikes Enterprise and the Discovery up against the bad, corrupt Section 31, headed by was it Central? I don't recall, Gray. It was the AI that was corrupting everything, trying to take over the world, trying to get
Mm.
Discovery's advanced database that it got from that alien life form. So with that, because of the amount of explosions, antimatter explosions, and a lot of them, a lot of pew pew bang bang, basically, Gray. Uh, a
Mhm.
neighbouring planet saw that, done what we would probably do today, Gray, with the technology we've got. They're probably at a similar technology level. Their telescopes,
Mhm.
their whatnot, their own James Webb telescope, whatever. And they were probably viewing all this and going, "Oh right, okay." They study it, antimatter, they reverse engineer it. They don't necessarily know how to make a warp core yet, so they make a dirty bomb instead out of it. Now that makes total sense for someone that doesn't properly understand the technology. Now, because of
Mhm.
Discovery made a mess in season 1 and 2, I thought that was genius from the Strange New Worlds writing
Mhm.
staff. Great to try and make something positive out of the first two seasons. Can I just imagine Pike face palming himself, going, "I know he didn't know about that. See, this is the thing. He doesn't know about that because only
Sure.
select people. No, he does know about it. What am I talking about? Shut up, Trevor. He does know about
He
that.
does
Only
know about it.
select
Yeah.
people. Yeah. So I could just imagine Pike face palming himself, going, Burnham, oh come on, what have you done? I mean, look at the predicament I'm in now. I've just had to reveal the Enterprise to people that are not ready. I did think that shot of the Enterprise hovering, we've seen it in trailers, and the action, and we thought that was the space cloud. People remember. I don't. That was an original series, wasn't it, Greg? You'll know better than me. Where everything's set in the clouds. There's a whole series in the clouds, isn't there?
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. For I don't recall what episode it was, and we thought when we saw that trailer with Enterprise hovering there, it was set there, but it wasn't. So I thought they'd done a great job of that. These guys have literally they're going to blow themselves up. So then Pike's just like, right, here's what's going to happen. If you don't, they're not listening. Okay, let's reveal the Enterprise and then let's see what you could do if you tread the right way. So then, obviously, the Prime Directive is kind of made just after, which is genius because it's the directive, isn't it? After all,
Well,
now,
the war essentially, or the war that didn't start,
yeah,
um, didn't start partially because all of a sudden they saw the Enterprise in the sky. So they saw, gee, we thought we had a big stick. There's a much bigger stick floating
that
up there.
that's what he said, didn't he? He literally
Yeah, he
used
did
the
say
stick
that. Yeah.
compliment. Yeah, he's like, oh, if we're talking about big sticks, it was almost like flexing. It's like, look at the size of yours,
Yeah.
look at the size of mine. Mine's bigger, and Pike's very Pike. Do you know? And we slightly diverge in this show, guys. By the way, as you'll probably know this. It's kind of our thing, Gray and I.
Because it's
But
fun.
yeah, it is fun. But we do remember. We have to remember where the initial track is, though. Otherwise, we'll get lost. But saying that, Pike does remind me of a cross between Shatner in Riker, I would say. So little bit of Picard, and what I mean by that is he's
I,
very cheeky and
I
he's
think
very.
it's I think
Hmm?
it's more Shatner and Picard,
Well, but
to be
probably is.
honest.
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is. And I think I say that because of the obvious things. Shatner was a ladies' man. There's an
Right.
episode in Strange New Worlds where he's with a lady, and we'll leave it at that. And he's a nice looking man, I guess. So why not? But he has got his head screwed on a lot more like Picard. Um, and I think that's what makes him a great captain. But I thought that episode was brilliant. They played that absolutely perfectly. They weren't space cops, nothing like that. They are just playing with going too far and not going far, but not going too far is what I meant to say.
And taking it back to Roddenberry for a second, there
Mhm.
was an episode in the original series, and I'd have to go back and find out the original name to it. But there was a point where I believe I don't know if it was Kirk or exactly, but they threatened the Enterprise to destroying major centers on a planet. And it was a whole episode that came around to go, you wouldn't do that, and they're going like, well, yeah, we would, and they showed how the planet saw that they were being targeted, and they said that the Enterprise could basically take out all these centers. And I don't remember the exact episode, but it was very similar to this one. Now they weren't going to do it,
Yeah.
but the threat of doing it was enough to get these people to start thinking.
Yeah.
And so that was another ballsy thing that Shatner did, which is very similar to what Pike did.
It's pushing it,
So
but not. It's pushing it far, but not going too far. Just taking it to the line, and we don't mind that. That's fine. We don't have a problem of stretching canon, stretching big factors like that. But don't break them because you don't want to piss us off. The next point before our kind of conclusion and final thoughts. This is the one that fascinates me the most, Gray. We touched on this briefly. Science fiction or science fact, and this is what makes Star
mhm.
Trek different from Star Wars. One's fantasy with green little aliens with funny ears, and I'm not saying that doesn't exist in Star Trek. It does, but Star Trek is very much grounded in science fiction. Now, this. I'm careful here because we got on our soapbox, Gray. We might be here till tomorrow with this recording. However, I've told Gray that he said to me at the start when he watched. I think you watched season 1 of Discovery, and you were
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, I'm done with this. What the hell are they doing?" Now, I wasn't happy with some of the things that they were breaking in canon. They were breaking some things. There's no doubt they broke a couple of things. The thing with the Klingons was ridiculous. Taking the thing with Spock and Burnham wasn't breaking it, but it was within a millimeter breaking it, and various other examples. Now, the one thing we've got here, many fans, the article says, were disappointed in Discovery, the spore dry technology, which is
Mhm.
entirely fictional without any scientific basis. And I quote, Forbes said the Discovery mycelial network, try saying that 10 times quickly, which
Yeah.
the spore drive works with, disappointingly does not exist as a higher dimensional space we can traverse. Now, this is where I can do something that Gray can't, and it's not a compliment and insult. It's just a different opinion. That's all it is. I'm a massive Star Trek fan. I don't like canon being broken, but see if I realise I can't beat them. I'm not saying I join them, but what I do is I take off that hardcore Trek hat, hardcore science fiction fan. I take it off for a second and I try and enjoy what I've got in front of me, realizing it's not proper Star Trek, and it gives me some kind of relief. Gray, it's weird, but I have to agree with that article wholeheartedly because the idea, if this had been a show called Discovery, no Star Trek links to it, and it had a spore drive in it, you would be thinking, wow, that's cool. That's almost like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where what was it called, the Infinity Drive, or I can't remember. It was the drive and where they could turn into anything and travel anywhere in the universe at the same time. It's things like that are ridiculous. If it's wacky science fiction, wacky fantasy, it would work, wouldn't it? Because it's not based in anything. But in Trek, we need to have something that's in theory possible. Probably never happen, but in theory it's possible. And they do this a lot with time travel. theoretically, I don't think time travel is possible, yet they pushed the button in that one. But warp drive is where it's at. This is why I don't think you'll ever see, even in Discovery in the future, you'll see, although they have it, trans warp and things like that. They have it, but you don't see it often because the main mode of travel is warp drive at the end of the day. And that's what we're used to. So I'm glad they binned it. They had fun with it. They binned it because it was never going to work. What's your thoughts on that, Gray? You like me that if you can't base it on science fact, just leave it out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as it's harder for me than you to sit there and just go back and go like, well, I got to pull Star Trek out of this and then I can enjoy it a little bit. I can't do it if I'm in it and it's Star Trek and you're gonna start really stretching it to a point where I just can't see it. I'm just like, I mean, the only thing that got me into Star Trek Discovery season 2 was purely because I knew Pike and the Enterprise are going to be in it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I never would have made it to see to the second season. And that whole just having Pike and the crew in there redeemed that whole season. Despite what's going on. But the Spore Drive, there's another whole story behind that one too. If you remember some of the articles that were going on around then,
Yeah, there's a
about
wacky scientist or something that, yeah.
a guy created a game before Discovery came around, and in that game is a Spore Drive that's run very similar to what they said in Trek, and there was a whole lawsuit thing going, and
Yeah, I
I
remember
don't
that now.
I don't know how it all ended up or what. I think there was too many things that were different about it that the guy didn't end up winning. But they ended up having people that were supporting him and sending money to him in his fight about this. So you kind of wonder, did they see that and just start writing stories about it?
Great, they 110% ripped that off. Come on. They
Yeah.
must have.
It did look like I saw parts of the game, and I'm looking at this going like, wow, that's all the way down to the little creature. I forgot what they called it.
The
In
tardigrade.
Yeah, that's it.
Which
And
is
I'm
real,
going like,
that exists in real life, by the way. It's just not
right,
huge,
right,
it's microscopic.
right. So it's just when I saw this guy create a game with this that it came out before the series, I'm like, wow,
I,
I don't know about that. Is there anything original anymore
Great,
going on in that?
don't get me wrong. Like the thought of the Spore Drive, if it wasn't Star Trek, and like I said before, it was just Discovery, and it wasn't based on science fact or Star Trek, we could actually
Mhm.
go, "Oh, this is wacky." I mean, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is feckin' nuts, but we love it
Oh, of course.
because it doesn't try to be something it's not. It knows it's nuts. It is nuts.
Well, it's a grand comedy, so you can get away with a lot of crazy stuff when you
Yeah,
start
yeah,
doing that.
it's a classic.
You know,
But
almost like when you're talking about faulty towers. Do you know if there's people that really run their hotel like that? No, I don't think so.
Faulty Towers. I wonder how many people know about that show. I do love that show. Faulty Towers. Yeah,
You
that's
gotta
right.
know
Yeah,
about that one.
true.
That's another
Manuel.
story.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Gray and I are agree on 90% of things in Star Trek. To be fair, so we're going to agree on that point. And I feel strongly about that one. I do love the idea of the Spore Drive, and it's still technically there, but it's now in the future. They've got all these modes of travel, and warp drive is still the main one. You notice that? Good.
I mean,
Uh,
if they did Spore Drive in a separate science
it
fiction
would be
slash
brilliant.
fantasy novel, yeah, it would have been great because it's not Trek,
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. And we feel strongly
um,
about that. Um,
mhm.
Now, there's a final point here that I find this interesting before we leave, so kind of closing thoughts. It says here, though Roddenberry might not approve of some aspects of the current era of Trek, he was often unhappy with what was happening to these shows and films while he was still alive. He frequently tried to stop things he disagreed with from moving forward, including, and I didn't know some of this by the way, including trying to stop TNG episode Redemption, that's a classic, from airing according to Screen Rant. He also famously disliked The Wrath of Khan, which is, I have two favourite movies in Star Trek, and I can't pick between them because it's the old Trek and the new Trek, or the more modern Trek. So I'm not going to choose between them. Of old Trek, it's The Wrath of Khan. Of modern Trek, it's First Contact. So I'm not going to pick between them. But The Wrath of Khan is the best original series type movie for me. So you're miles. This is where you're wrong, Ron, but hands down. And it's saying here, considered to be the best of the 13 Trek films. If someone said that to me, I'm not going to disagree with them. really not.
Sure.
He disliked Patrick Stewart as Picard. I knew about that one. That's famous.
Hmm.
How wrong he was proven. And he disliked the fan favourite episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. Now, I don't like it when it's silly in Star Trek at all, so I understand that. Don't agree with it. I think that's still funny. He also tried to stop the entire development of the Next Generation at first, which I kind of know about as well. Again, you're wrong. This was
Hmm.
according to Shatner's documentary, Chaos in the Bridge. Now, there's a bit to unpack there, Mr. Gray. I knew some of that. I didn't know all of it. You probably knew all of it. This whole paragraph that I just read out, this is where, for me, Roddenberry was just 110% wrong. Thoughts,
Right.
please, sir.
I think, unfortunately, as good as the many things he did do, I think as he started to get older, uh, he did have a drinking problem too, and that didn't help.
Didn't know that.
Um, right, he did, and I think it's just that some of these things were, some people are set in their ways. Like you ever hear the joke? Sometimes they say, "Oh, you're stuck in the '60s, or you're stuck in the '80s, or you're stuck in the '90s,"
Yep.
and I think that's true because I think to a certain point he was stuck in a time period or era or series of decades that he couldn't get past. His vision of Star Trek going forward in the movies, because he was alive during then, was to keep the future movies doing pretty much exactly what they did in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and we all know that wasn't going to work. Um,
Yeah.
it was no, it was not it had a lot to do in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Those drab blue outfits and everything else looking kind of drab and not too colorful. That was Dahl Roddenberry at that
Yep.
time. And there was a lot of push and pull there. He messed with the script a lot and basically just would take the script that, you know, competent writers would write and just rip it up and destroy it. And they had
Ugh.
to go back and rewrite and get it back. And it was nuts. And then Wrath of Khan coming out, which obviously was the jewel of the films, and everyone loved it. All the fans loved it, universally, and yet he hated it and never would have let it hit the theaters if it was up to him. So some people drop out of touch, and he dropped out of touch. And hey, look, it happens with a lot of people. It's just the way it is. And we all know that in all those instances, he was definitely wrong.
Yeah.
And I think if he had his way, I'm not saying the series might not have been popular to some, but it would. I think it would have ended up falling flat at some point
Yeah.
and lost its appeal, and stuff. Now, one can say also that now today with things like Discovery, they pretty much have done the same thing. Well, it kind of
Yes.
kind of screwed it up, but I get it. But the point is that at least of the original overall vision is still there. It's still what he
Of
I
course.
think pretty much what he envisioned it to be. Now, his son, Eugene Roddenberry, has been quoted here and there across the internet, and I think he kind of takes what would be the proper way of saying this. He kind of takes the right way when he's very careful what he says.
Is he like
He
his
tries
old
to make
man, Gray? Is he like his old man, or
yeah,
is
oh
he
yeah,
more forward
yeah.
thinking?
No, he's more forward thinking for sure, but he's not going to say the things that we just said, and he's not going to really acknowledge some of the stuff that we've talked about. He won't go that far.
So is he a
But
middle
but
line then? Is he in between his dad and what other
pretty
people
much.
want these days? Yeah.
Pretty much. He
Right.
wants to be he wants to be good for all people. And I understand that. That's tough. What are you gonna do when they're saying all these great things about your dad and at the same time they're saying some of these not so great things.
What's his role? Is
You know?
he like a
He's
advisor or
executive
something?
producer and yeah, he's executive producer, but then again they hand executive producer title out to everybody
Exactly
that
like
has a couple
confetti.
bucks.
So take that with a pinch of
Yeah.
salt.
So
Huh.
so yes, I would say that he would be advisor per se, but to be honest, you know, it's really his name. I don't think he does a whole lot. I mean, I'm sure he has some input, and they can choose to use the input or not. And that's a good thing. I mean, I like having the fact that there's a Roddenberry involved. I think it's great.
Yeah.
But let's be honest. What he's there for mostly the name,
He is.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff.
You're,
I mean,
you're,
has he written any episodes of Star Trek? No, because
of
he's
course he
not a
hasn't.
writer.
No, he's not a writer.
And stuff. Exactly.
Stick to
So he
stick to what
can.
you're good at.
So do I want to see a Roddenberry involved, even if it's only a tiny bit? Yeah, damn straight. Why not?
No, I think
But
you have to.
beyond that point, no, it's
Yeah.
it's not it's not happening.
Stay in your lane, young man. Probably not that young, but compared to his old man, yeah, he's
Yeah.
certainly a young man. So yeah, we Gray and I both 100%. That last part we disagree with in that respect. There,
But
it's
by the way, as a side note, and they kind of brought it up in the article a little bit, and I'm just going to bring Star Wars back into the picture for a moment. People forget too that even though George Lucas created Star Wars and made the absolutely fabulous Episode 4, 5, and 6, well, guess what? He was also responsible for Episode 1, 2, and 3, which weren't that great. 1 was awful, 2 was only a little better, and 3 at least was the best of the 3. So he's had his problems too, many problems, and I can go on, and maybe we'll do that another day. But the
yeah,
point is that the great George Lucas even messed up Star Wars on his own quite well.
of course he did.
So
Yeah. Some of these geniuses
yeah,
are not perfect. Um,
right.
being honest with you, the slightly sidetracking the thing that he's most wrong about Roddenberry is the Wrath of Khan. I mean, he disliked it.
Yeah.
That's a matter of opinion. You could argue, but like I said, it's my favourite of the original series movies. I'm actually going to see that in a remaster at the cinema in like 2 weeks or so, actually, and I can't
Cool.
wait to see that on a big screen. But yeah, essentially, I think there is one paragraph that I'm going to read at the very end that we've got down here, Greg, because it sums it up perfectly. That'll be our literal closing statement, if you like. But you can chip in with any comments you've got before then. Is it safe to say that reading through this and discussing this, that Roddenberry was both a genius and a bit mad sometimes, and also right sometimes and wrong other times?
Sure. Like any other human.
Like any other human, you couldn't say it more perfectly that. And literally,
Hmm.
whether you like it or not, and I'll leave it on this bombshell. But before I do, please remember, guys, if you do like talking head videos on Star Trek, various thoughts and topics we come up with, please give it a cheeky like, thumbs up, and a subscription, because we'll do regular videos on this, and we'll also export it to the Trek Way on podcast platforms, so you can listen to it that way as well. We will be coming back with our kind of review and opinion piece on the first episode of season 3 of Lord Decks. That'll be probably a few days after it airs, because I'll be away with our colleagues, Extreme PC UK, doing a bit of streaming and gaming with them down in England. So we're busy for that, but we will get this review out to you, that episode, after we come back. So whether you like Roddenberry or not, and I think this last thing was brilliant, was genius. I thought you were going to steal my thunder before, Gray, when you started talking about George Lucas and Star Wars. Roddenberry, like George Lucas and Star Wars, created something that was taken over by new people, and he did not approve of every decision. Yes, this would mean that he'd probably not like everything, but he'd probably like the fact that his franchise is worth an estimated $4 billion USD. And that says it all, people. That's just controversial
Yeah.
to the end. Anyway, on that bombshell, we are going to love and leave you. We will be back to say for that first episode. But until then, say goodbye to the people, Gray. See you
Goodbye
later.
to the people.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.